Hey guys, it's ViewMasters Reactions, and we're back with Adventure Time. Even though 2 years ago is when I last watched Season 7, Episode 1, I had said this to people in the past that I watched or I knew of Uncivilized Elk. They did Adventure Time, Steven Universe, Infinity Train, other things as well, but those three specifically are the shows that I have been reacting to since pretty much the beginning of my channel, almost going on 4.5, 5 years now. I think January makes 5 years, a half a decade that I've been doing YouTube. But Adventure Time was within that first year of deciding what shows to do. It was always a show I wanted to tap into, one of my brother's favorite of all time, if not favorite animated shows of all time. It is extremely intelligent, it is crazy, it is weird, but all in the right ways, and I loved it. But we finished it about a year and a half ago, I want to say. Every Monday, if you guys weren't aware, I edit an episode. We do one episode every Monday for the last 4+ years. I just edited Season 7, Episode 1. It was almost 2 years to the day. I think I reacted to it in October of 2021. It is almost September of 2023. So we're like a month and a half away from the 2-year point in which I watched that, because we would edit one a week and do 2 a week on Patreon, hence why we were so far ahead. But it had to be at least another year till we finished, give or take. So I feel like we have wrapped up Adventure Time at least a year, year and a half ago. Like I said, I could look it up, but not important right now, because what's important is I said that Uncivilized Elk started, at least that I know of, on their channel, started doing reviews at the beginning of Season 7, at least for Adventure Time. They have Steven Universe, they have Infinity Train. I think they did most of Infinity Train, and I have finished Infinity Train, and I already watched all the Infinity Train reviews that Uncivilized Elk did. That is why I didn't do those. But Infinity Train was a Patreon exclusive. I threw the first episode or two up on YouTube. You could check out at least the first one. I know I did 2 edits because there were problems with it, but then I found out it got taken off of HBO, and it's hard to even find the show now. It was a phenomenal show, but Adventure Time was always a favorite. So in my mind, I was like, by the time I get to episode 1 of Season 7, I'll be in a spot or a position in which I can possibly go back and review my own opinion on what I saw and what I think now that I have finished the whole series. And I thought, what better way to do it than to give you my opinions and then see what the review of Uncivilized Elk is like, to compare my thoughts and what I may have missed. And I might do this depending on what you guys think. If you want this, if people don't really care, maybe I'll do a couple and I'll see how it goes. But I feel like it'd be cool to see my opinion of the episodes after I edit them, rewatching them 2 years later, and knowing the conclusion of everything Adventure Time. On top of that, we just found out like a month or 2 ago, well, we knew about it. There were hints and rumors there was going to be a Fiona and Cake show, like a spinoff. Well, about a month or 2 ago, we got the trailer. It looks awesome. There were lots of people we saw in that trailer that are from here, specifically Simon I saw. What better time to start doing one of these with the edit we do every Monday, leading up into the premiere, which is next week. I leave for Dragon Con the day Fiona and Cake drop, depending on HBO, because I'm pretty sure it's Max now. It's not HBO Max anymore. It's just Max. It's being dropped on Max. That's where Distant Lands dropped. That's where all of Adventure Time is right now streaming. I think I'll have plenty of time. Usually it drops around 3 a.m. Even if it drops later in the afternoon, it is likely that Fiona and Cake will be out next week, with Adventure Time dropping on Monday, and then that, I think, is a Tuesday. We're going to start getting lots of Adventure Time content. I'm also going to contact Uncivilized Elk, because what I'm going to do is watch this. It's only about 6 minutes, so it's not like a lot of content. I'm just curious to talk to you guys about it, see what they have to say, talk about it after, comparing thoughts and what I missed or what I didn't pick up on. Then I'm going to email Uncivilized Elk, be like, yo, go check this out. If you aren't cool with this, I will stop doing it. But I almost want to collaborate with Uncivilized Elk, because they have the most Adventure Time content. When I Google it, or when I did back in the day, I haven't done it of recent, but I remember Uncivilized Elk always came up, and that's how I found Infinity Train and everything else. And those are the shows I'm doing now. Just finished Infinity Train, the entire series, and we're just starting Season 2 of Steven Universe. So I am talking way too long. As far as the episode, we had Bonnie and Neddy. I just edited it up so it's fresh in my mind. We found out about the mother gum and how Bonnie dropped first, And then Neddy dropped, got hit on the spike, very sensitive, acting very skittish and just afraid of the world and everything around it. Sucks on the thing. I mean, it's kind of weird to say the least, but that is what gives life to all of the Candy Kingdom. And without Neddy, we would all be in trouble. And now we have the King of Ooh, obviously. That's how season 7 started. King of Ooh, Toronto. And at the end of the episode, it was a bizarre episode because it started off with Finn and Jake in armor, and they were kind of just going along with the flow. Bonnie, aka Bubblegum Princess, was building a cabin with Peppermint Butler out in the middle of nowhere and was basically like, fine, you guys don't need me, I don't need you. And she does care and love the candy people, but I get it. She like felt unneeded, unloved, unwanted. At the end of the day, Neddy needed help. Neddy's her brother. We went, we saw, we conquered, and Neddy is back underneath doing his thing. But then it ended with the King of Ooh walking in, throwing his robe onto Finn, and was just talking about weird stuff. What the hell was he talking about? Oh, he was talking about whether or not he could drink the water, aka what Neddy is secreting when sucking from the root. I'm curious to see what Uncivilized Elk has to say. Let's jump into that, and then we'll talk more at the end, compare our thoughts. You guys want to see more of what I do? In the description of every video is a link for Patreon. You'll see every episode of Adventure Time in full, Steven Universe, Infinity Train, Legend of Korra, Avatar. My Hero Academia is going on right now. There are hundreds of movies and shows, thousands of hours, full unedited movies and everything. Check it in the description as a link for Patreon. If not, Season 7, Episode 1, the review of Bonnie and Neddy by Uncivilized Elk.
Adventure Time is back! Unfortunately, the Season 7 premiere is not a mind-blowing two-parter like the previous 2 seasons. This was to be expected. The prior 2 season finales left off on essentially a cliffhanger, whereas Season 6 came to more or less a conclusion. A conclusion marking drastic change in the Candy Kingdom, but a conclusion nonetheless. Overall, Bonnie and Neddy isn't a bad episode, but it does come across as somewhat bland and unexceptional. It's also plagued by stunted attempts at humor and awkward pacing, which are detrimental to the interesting backstory the episode presented. As an isolated episode, I would describe this ep as pretty good, but as the season premiere, which follows an amazing finale, which you can't really isolate this episode from, especially after a 5-month break, this episode just feels like it didn't deliver the goods.
I kind of agree. It wasn't bad.
That's about the enthusiasm I had at the end. Despite the episode containing elements I did really enjoy. Including the recap of last season felt unnecessary, but one thing the recap accomplishes is that it highlights Kinavu's knowledge of Orgalorg. Now, whether Kinavu got the details from Finn and Jake afterward, or whether he knew of Orgalorg's intentions before he won the election, remains unknown. If it's the latter, it further shows how nefarious Kinavu is, as he is willing to let an elder god bent on destruction achieve immense power and knowledge solely to become the princess of a kingdom. It would be the best demonstration of how little Kinavu cares about anything but himself at the current moment in time. So I would prefer to think Kinavu knew the general gist of what Orgalorg was trying to do before it was defeated by Finn. Still, even if that were the case, I personally do not find Kinavu particularly interesting.
Me either.
He never struck me as a character dynamic enough to hold his own, so when he has extended dialogue such as in this episode, I quickly begin to lose interest. His speech and mannerisms, even when intended to be silly and quirky, don't make me smile like many other characters in the series do.
He's really frustrating and annoying.
Doesn't grip me, and I don't think his narcissistic and blasé attitude is captivating. That doesn't mean he can't continue to develop into a character I do enjoy, but at the current time, I would prefer him off-screen as much as possible.
Agreed.
While it is glossed over a bit too quickly for my liking, Princess Bubblegum's past is finally revealed in this episode. She spawned from a source called the Mother Gum at the same time as her brother Neddy. Her pool of relatives appears to be rather large though, and it raises many questions as to what has happened to them through time and where they are now. Neddy is a new character that seems to have practically no autonomy. While he instantly reminded me of Nidhogg from Norse mythology, the dragon that gnaws at the roots of the tree Yggdrasil, the comparison pretty much ends there at the superficial level. PB constructed a barricade to isolate Neddy from the world he fears, and here, Neddy has continued to perform the same task for centuries. Not only is he supposed to have some form of disability, visualized by his upside-down facial characteristics, but he was also traumatized early on in his life. We are led to believe that he as an individual leans towards introversion, but the trauma further made him want to hide away from the world. His one source of enjoyment is sucking at the roots of a tree, which makes a versatile elixir that PB based her kingdom around. PB's achievements are not solely of her own doing, but are built upon the foundation of her brother. Literally, her brother is the foundation of the kingdom, along with this mysterious tree. The details behind the mysterious tree, which contains a seemingly infinite amount of nectar, remains unknown, and while it does invoke a mythology-like feel to the origin story of PB and her brother, I would find it a bit disappointing if the tree is not further elaborated on in the future. While in a sense the tree has provided Neddy with his only source of enjoyment in life, it can also be argued that it prevented him from coming to grips with the world.
So bizarre.
Had he never found the tree, he would eventually have to confront the world around him and perhaps realize it's not as frightening as he makes it out to be. PB is complicit in Neddy's single-minded existence, but was it wrong on her part? Should she have actually tried to pry him from the one thing he gains comfort and security from? Arguably, the message at the end of the episode is that people have unique ways of functioning, and we should be kind and respect that. But the somber tone of PB's quiet and tender care of her sibling eggs on the notion that she is not happy with the way things have been and continue to be. And she wishes that she could be a real meaningful part in her brother's life, beyond providing him a haven in which he can continue to do his one pleasure. Is PB's sadness at her brother's state of existence solely selfish, in that PB wishes he could be more ingrained in her own life? Or does it also contain the idea that perhaps Neddy could be happier with a more well-rounded life, which consists of more than a single action?
Both.
It's a question without a real answer, and it's difficult to discuss because one would have to assume they know what is best for another individual. Still, my favorite part of the episode is that this dynamic is presented and explored. And while it may seem like a muddled mess, that's because it actually is a muddled mess. It's complicated, and it's sad, and that's what makes it so interesting. So all in all, I have praise for elements of this backstory, but the presentation in this episode brings the whole thing down. Most of the jokes fell flat to me. Not only was I not having a good chuckle, I often was left completely unamused. That's not to say there weren't any good jokes at all, because there were.
There were. This one?
Pretty quiet, huh?
It's just that most of the jokes didn't work for me. The quirky and odd phrases Adventure Time incorporates into character dialogue missed the mark drastically this episode. Phrases like,
"This one was hot like fire,"
are leagues away from phrases such as,
"Yeah, man, it's spicy baby fun."
The plot progression of the episode also had a disjointed feel to it, which made the final product lack a cohesive feel.
I would say
in the end, the season premiere could have certainly been more grandiose, but it wasn't a bummer, and I did enjoy it.
All right, so that was about 6 minutes. We got the take from Uncivilized Elk, and honestly, I agree with everything they pretty much said. I would have to say, the only thing I didn't really think about, the idea that the King of Oo knew so much about Orgolorg and must be aware of, like, the mythology and the lore of the world to have known that. Like, he knew a lot, but like Uncivilized Elk said, it is very possible that Finn and Jake or others could have filled him in, or maybe he is just all-knowing. We, or at least I, and those of you who have completed it in full, know where the story goes and how it ends. I feel like even though we know we see the King of Oo again, they really never explained him, and if they did, I kind of forget. But, like, as far as on, like, understanding him fully, they never really tell you any of that. So it is kind of just a guess and up in the air. Same thing with how he's saying, does Bonnie actually want to have a life with her brother, or just wish that her brother had a well-rounded life that wasn't him hiding underneath the foundation of the Candy Kingdom, sucking on a root for all eternity so he could fuel the people, so to speak. But regardless, even though I know we see these characters again, they didn't really dive into that too much that I remember. Like I said, I watch 2 of these a week, every week for 4 years, 3.5 years, give or take. Some of it I do forget. I mean, there had to be like upwards of 250, 300 episodes, and I was watching it pretty fast, and I never went back and watched them. The only times I've went back is when I edit them. So, for instance, season 7, episode 1, when I edited it yesterday for you guys today, that was the first time I had rewatched it since I watched it for the first time almost 2 years ago. So like I said, it's like one of those things where you rewatch a movie a bunch of times and you start picking up on things and seeing things you didn't see and having more idea and theories. But right now, I would have to agree with Uncivilized Elk that episode was a very bizarre episode, very weird for the start of a season, and it was like a little unhinged and just like not what we're used to, I guess. Uncivilized Elk put it very well. I would have to agree the jokes weren't as great. The whole thing, I said it in the beginning, Finn and Jake in their armor and dealing with that whole aspect of things. I mean, it makes sense being as what happened in the end of the finale of season 6. Everything happened the way it did. It makes sense that they'd be there. Bonnie's doing her thing. We're going to obviously now go back, and the King of Ooh is like, all right, well, the world is over. The 4 of us will sit here. And then Neddy did his thing, and everything went back to normal. So we already know King of Ooh running things into the ground. He, I would have to agree also, is, to me, I think I've said this many times, I didn't say it in that episode that I recall, but the King of Ooh, I never really liked him. He's not the worst, and I don't hate him per se, but he always annoyed me. I always find him extremely frustrating. I don't know how anybody, well, I was going to say, I don't know how anybody would even have elected him to that position, but we're dealing with the candy people who aren't the brightest group of people. Many of them just kind of go with whatever direction they're thrown into, or someone could just be like, I think you should do that. And they'll go, you know what? That's what we should do. And then they'll all agree. And the King of Ooh becomes the princess, because the whole episode he also was acting like he is the new princess. Granted, he's the King of Ooh, but he was like, I am the new princess because I took over for Princess Bubblegum. Very bizarre. Even the way the episode ended, even knowing that Neddy took back over, the King of Ooh went and still had Jake and Finn as his guards and was still like acting the part like he had something to do with it, when he pretty much gave up and was selfishly going to use up whatever resources were left to survive with Toronto, him, Finn, and Jake. Either way, you guys let me know what you thought of this. This is what I feel like we should do from here on. And like I said, I'm going to email Uncivilized Elk. I saw they did do a thing on Fiona and Cake. About 4 or 5 months ago, they did something on an older Distant Lands episode. So they are still around getting content out. I would like to communicate with them, see if we could collaborate, because I'm doing something weekly for years and only adding more Adventure Time related content. So you guys let me know what you think. If anybody has anything they want to say or any requests or anything related to this, like things we could do to jazz it up a little, I just felt like I should get this out there and see what you guys think. Because this is the first time any of you are seeing me as far as Adventure Time content goes. Since we ended Distant Lands, I haven't done anything except for Fiona and Cake trailer, which was like a month or 2 ago. Besides that, it's been like a year and a half. So a lot of it is fresh in my mind when I edit it. A lot of it I forget, but we have completed it in full, as well as Distant Lands will be on to Fiona and Cake. Maybe things with Fiona and Cake will tap into things we are reviewing in the seasons to come. If you want to see more of what I do, in the description of every video is a link for Patreon. You'll see every episode of Adventure Time in full, unedited. Steven Universe, Infinity Train, The Owl House, Avatar, Legend of Korra, Peaky Blinders, Doctor Who, Person of Interest, hundreds of movies and shows, all in full, unedited. Check in the description for the link for Patreon. If not, comments down below. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.